All right, with chapter 49, we're going to get into more of these surrounding neighboring nations of Israel and the destruction that's going to be upon them as Babylon marches through the area. So, verse 1, concerning the Ammonites. Okay, remember, these are the people that lived at the south end of if I remember, at the south end of the Dead Sea. They're also the descendants of Lot, one of Lot's daughters. Okay, remember, Edom and Ammonites are there. So this is concerning the Ammonites. Thus saith the Lord, hath Israel no sons? Hath he no heir? Why then doth their king inherit Gad, and his people dwell in his cities? Therefore, behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will cause an alarm of war to be heard in Rabbah of the Ammonites. And it shall be a desolate heap, and her daughters shall be burned with fire. Then shall Israel be heir unto them that were his heirs, saith the Lord. So there's a lot of animosity between the Ammonites and Israel, even going back to the days of Joshua and Moses. They didn't like each other. A lot of family issues there. Now, Rabbah, this is a city of the Ammonites. So Ammon is identified with the current capital of Jordan. It was the capital of the Ammonites. So again, we talked about present day Jordan is where Edom and Ammon, the Ammonites and Edomites lived, basically. Moabites, excuse me, not Edomites, Moabites were at the north end, Ammonites were at the south end of the Dead Sea. That's the land of Jordan today. So the Ammonites were a bigger part of this land, basically. So here's what's interesting. They're really considered family. It's really, this is, again, they're the daughter of Lot, which is Lot was a nephew of Abraham. So they're distant cousins from each other, basically. What's interesting is the Ammonites are the ones that supported the assassination of Gedaliah, the governor. So if you remember, after the Jerusalem destruction by Babylon, Babylon appointed Gedaliah, who was one of the princes of Jerusalem, of Judah, as the governor of the land. And then he was assassinated by one of his fellow military people who was being supported by Ammon. Remember, he destroyed Gedaliah and killed Gedaliah and all of the troops and people around him, and then they took everybody prisoner that was in Riblah, and they marched him over to go to the Ammonites to flee. Never made it there before some of the Jewish army guys that were supporting Gedaliah found out, went and captured the people, and the guy that assassinated Gedaliah fled to the Ammonites to escape, basically, with a small group of people. That's the Ammonites. That's who we're going to talk about right now, basically, getting into these people. So, it's crazy to think that the whole land will be desolate. Her daughters shall be burned with fire. Ouch. That's harsh. They were destroyed. Most of them were destroyed by the Arab invasion, not so much. I think they were kind of seen as a helper of Babylon a little bit. They were kind of more happy that Babylon was doing what it's doing, basically. They were conquered for a while, but the Arabs, when they rose up later on, that's when Ammonites and the Moabites were obliterated as a national identity, basically. In the 6th century, so it was after Babylon, basically. But that doesn't sound good when you're burning their daughters. That's not good. That's a lot of destruction and bad things for the people. So verse 3, howl, O Heshbon, for Ai is spoiled. Cry, ye daughters of Rabbah, gird you with sackcloth. Lament and run to and fro by the hedges, for their king shall go into captivity, and his priests and his princes together. So again, this is Heshbon's a town, the border of Ammon and Moab, remember? And it changed control between the two of them from time to time. It would switch back and forth. But this is telling them, basically, telling the women to play the mourner, be the mourning. Used to call it, when somebody died in your family, you would hire women to come mourn over your loved one, basically. So this is basically, you'll be in mourning and you won't be sure what to do. You're not sure what's going to happen. And it's interesting, not only is the king being captive, but it says the priests, so that's religious leaders, and princes, which are governmental leaders, will be together. They're all going to be captive. Verse 4, wherefore gloriest thou in the valleys, thy flowing valley, O backsliding daughter? that trusted in her treasure, saying, Who shall come unto me? So they believed their civil action was so advanced that it would be dumb for someone to attack them. They thought, again, just like the Moabites, they were kind of left alone, and they thought they were all that. They thought they were amazing and were somewhat above everybody else. Nope, they weren't. They got annihilated, basically. Verse 5, Behold, I will bring fear upon thee, saith the Lord God of hosts, from all those that be about thee. And ye shall be driven out every man right forth, and none shall gather up him that wandereth. And afterward I will bring again the captivity of the children of Ammon, saith the Lord. So again, they will be gathered when the gathering of Israel and all that starts happening. Eventually they will gather as well. So it's nice, God loves all of his children. He doesn't want them to die. He doesn't want them to die in their sins. He wants them to be saved. And so he's bringing more than just Israel back. He's not favoring one group. He's helping a lot of people to be restored and come back and have another chance, which is really great. Now, it is believed that this prophecy was given after the capture of Jerusalem. The Ammonites had taken advantage of the depressed condition of Israel and invaded their territories, hoping to make them their own. Jeremiah intimated that God would preserve the descendants of Israel and bring them home again one day to their inheritances. The promise to the Ammonites was fulfilled when they returned with the Moabites and Israelites with permission, given the Edict of Cyrus. That's Old Testament study manuals talking about that maybe they were gathered in their day and age more than latter days. It is of some interest that there was a revival of Moabite fortunes later. In the 2nd century BC, the Tobiad family was still ruling, and in the 1st century BC, Judas Maccabeus fought against the Ammonites. And you can see that in 1st Maccabees, which is a different Jewish scripture, basically. So the Ammonites do have a resurgence back then, part of that intermediary period between the Old and New Testaments, but then, of course, they're ultimately destroyed later on. So verse 7, concerning Edom. So this is another group of people. Okay, we talked about Moabites in the previous chapter. We've talked about the Ammonites. Now we're talking about the Edomites, basically. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman? His counsel perisheth from the prudent. Is their wisdom vanished? So now the kingdom of Edom lay south of the Dead Sea and extended for about 100 miles between the Wadi Zered and the Gulf of Aqaba. Like Moab, it was a high mountainous area which fell away steeply to the west into the Arabah. It had cultivatable areas. It straddled the King's Highway, which passed along the eastern plateau of Edom to the north. Teman, which means south, was either a district or a city of Edom, but here it is a poetic name for Edom. Traditionally, Edom was famous for wisdom, although the basis for this is not clear. At the time of the prophecy, sound counsel and wisdom had departed from them. That's Thompson in his book of Jeremiah pulled that together. So he's in verse 7. This is the thing: is there wisdom, normal wisdom in Teman? So this is a very wise group of people. But their counsel perisheth. They were giving wrong advice, basically. So verse 8, flee ye, turn back, dwell deep, O inhabitants of Dedan. For I will bring the calamity of Esau upon him, the time that I will visit him. So this is just, the people of Edom, the Edomites, are descendants of Esau, who is the brother of Jacob. They're the sons of Isaac. Okay. Oh, no, sorry. That's right. Jacob and Esau were the brothers. That's right. Sorry. I got that right. Now, Dedan is the oasis of Dedan, lay in northwest Arabia to the southeast of Edom, may have been part of Edom. Alternately, a clan of Dedanites may have settled in Edom. It is often identified with the oasis of El Ula and the surrounding area. Dedan is warned to flee and hide in the face of the coming disaster in Edom, here referred to as Esau. According to Genesis 36, Esau, the brother of the patriarch Jacob, was the ancestor of Edom. The name Esau is here a poetic name for the Edomites in much the same way as Jacob or Israel was for the people of Palestine. So that was Thompson again in his book. So this is the great people we're talking about, the Edomites, the descendants of Esau. Verse 9, if grape gatherers come to thee, would they not leave some gleaning grapes? If thieves by night, they will destroy till they have enough. So let's just think for this for a second. Okay, so grape gatherers, these are the people that go out in the vineyards. They pick the grapes off the vine to bring them in so they can be pressed, turned into wine. Usually, when they go out there, they glean the vines. They take the grapes in, but they oftentimes leave bundles out there. They maybe didn't see it. It got kind of hidden in the leaves of the grapes. They didn't notice it or something, and those are left. Oftentimes, the poor would then come in at night to vineyards and fields to harvest the additional aspects of the fields that weren't taken the first time. Part of the law of Moses talks about that. You plant a field, you do your best to harvest it, but anything that gets left is for the poor. Basically, don't try to take all of the wheat off the field. Don't try to make all the money off the deal you can. Leave some for everybody else. Be considerate of their needs as well in helping the poor when you do a transaction. So that's what he's talking about here is don't they usually leave some there for you? And then same with thieves. Don't usually thieves, when they break into your house or your car or whatever, they get in, they get what they want, and they get out. They don't linger and stick around to do more. That's just dangerous. The longer you're there, the more likely you're going to get caught. So they get in, they get what they want, and they get out, basically. So that's what he's saying in here isn't there resources left? Isn't there stuff usually left over after these things happen that you can still use? So verse 10, he says, but I have made Esau bare. So there won't be anything left over. I have uncovered his secret places. He shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. They're going to be destroyed, just wiped out. No resources in anything. So the Lord, this is Old Testament study manual, the Lord has said he had made Edom bare, meaning he had uncovered all the hiding places, made them known to their enemies. Also in reference to the previous verses, the value of Edom will be taken. Nothing left. The wealth, the resources, everything is going to be gone from this area, basically. That's what they're talking about. Utter destruction of these people. Verse 11, leave thy fatherless children. I will preserve them alive, and let thy widows trust in me. So this is interesting. Fatherless children. Why are they fatherless? Because they died in the war. Their dads died fighting. And now the children have no dad. And the women don't have a husband. That's why they are widows. And so he's saying, if you guys want to survive, trust in God. Verse 12, for thus saith the Lord, behold, they whose judgment was not to drink of the cup have assuredly drunken. And art thou he that shall altogether go unpunished? Thou shalt not go unpunished, but thou shalt surely drink of it. For I have sworn of by myself, saith the Lord, that Bozrah shall become a desolation, a reproach, a waste, and a curse, and all the cities thereof shall be perpetual wastes. So Bozrah is the capital of Edom. Okay, it's probably near the modern town of Busira. I think that's Busira. It's probably a better way to say it. So destroyed, resources taken. It's going to be wiped out. A lot like Jerusalem was, basically. Now realize Esau is a brother to Jacob. His grandfather is Abraham. So the Abrahamic covenant still flows with his family, basically. So they're still part of that. Now, verse 14, I have heard a rumor from the Lord, and an ambassador is sent unto the heathen, saying, gather ye together, and come against her, and rise up to the battle. For lo, I will make thee small among the heathen, and despised among men. So this is Edom is not going to be in a good position here. Verse 16, thy terribleness hath deceived thee, and the pride of thine heart, O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, that holdest the height of the hill. Though thou shouldest make thy nest as high as the eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord. Now this is an interesting point, because Edom lived high up in the mountains, basically. They were kind of hidden away. They had They had the strongholds, the fortresses built up in the mountains, basically. In fact, one of the most famous ones is el Biara, which is lying behind the ladder Petra. So if you think of Petra, and if you might think, I've heard that name. Where have I heard Petra? Petra is an area in the Middle East known for a canyon that looks like a crescent moon. Now, hopefully, those of you who are fans of Indiana Jones have caught on to that idea and realize, oh, yeah, the Crescent Moon Valley from the third Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the, not, oh, man. Okay, now the other Indiana Jones movies are moving through my mind right now. This is the third one, which is the Search for the Holy Grail. This is where, if you remember, they go into the canyon and there's like that big temple carved into the side of the canyon, and they go in, and that's where they meet. He has to go through the three, the penitent man shall pass, and the all those kinds of things will happen. The saws come out and cut the head off of the guy, and then he has to walk across the name of this stones with the letters on it, the name of God. Has to spell Yahweh, and he almost falls through with a J and realizes it's not a J, it should be a Y. And then he has to leap from the lion's mouth, and he meets the Knights Templar guy that's defending the Holy Grail, and all the cups and the holy water and all that stuff. That was all depicted as being in this canyon where this like temple was hidden. That is Petra. That whole area, not just that area, that temple is Petra. That whole land is Petra. Now, if you go there and look at the far end of that canyon, that Crescent Moon Canyon, it's kind of a peninsula, basically, with this Crescent Moon Canyon inside of it. The edge of that peninsula, on the side of that mountain, basically, there's lots of places built into that. There is like a city, a small city, people dwelt building into the rock. So when we think of like, the Southwest here in America, like Mesa Verde, for instance. Okay, there's it's like a big plateau, big cliff, and then the cliff kind of cuts under, and then people built houses in there. They would make bricks, and they make up these bricks and kind of use the floor of this entrance to be the floor, and then the top of the cliff is the ceiling, and then they build their stuff in there. So Mesa Verde, if you look at Mesa Verde, you can see more about that. That's kind of similar, but what they did in this area, you can go see this stuff today. It's over. I think this is all still part of the nation of Jordan, I believe is where this is. They literally just carved their homes into the side of the canyon wall. And so Petra was a temple inside that Crescent Moon Canyon, but around to the side, there's more of that. That is the land of Edom. That is where Esau and his descendants lived. That's what they're talking about here. They dwellest in the clefts of the rocks and holdest the height of the hill. They lived in these mountain areas. They built into the mountains, basically. This is Esau. That's what they did. So kind of a cool part of history, if you think about it, is this area around Petra. So whenever you think of Petra, think of not so much the Holy Grail, because that was fake. That was just a movie. But realize this is Esau. And this is what they're talking about here in Jeremiah 49, of the people that lived in these areas. So verse 17, also Edom shall be a desolation. Every one that goeth by it shall be astonished, and shall hiss at all the plagues thereof. Verse 18 is interesting, as in the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah and the neighbor cities thereof. It wasn't just Sodom and Gomorrah that was destroyed in that asteroid. It was a larger area. Saith the Lord, no man shall abide there, neither shall a son of man dwell in it. So this is the same area. This place out here, it's desert. These areas have not been inhabited in a very, very long time. We see the ruins, but they're still studying those ruins, but they've been uninhabited for a very long time. Verse 19, behold, he shall come up like a lion from the swelling of Jordan, against the habitation of the strong. But I will suddenly make him run away from her, and who is a chosen man, that I may appoint over her? For who is like me, and who will appoint me the time? And who is that shepherd that will stand before me? Now let's look at verse 19. There's a lot in here. Okay. Thompson made this comment. He said, Yahweh is likened to a lion in search of food, coming out of the jungle like thickets in the region of the Jordan to seize one of the sheep which were grazing in the evergreen pastures of the Jordan Valley. So just like a lion will stalk the edge of the tree lines, looking out, that he knows once he goes out in the open, he's exposed. For if the sheep see him coming, the sheep can run. If the shepherds see the lion, they might attack the lion. So he's got to wait for his right time in the shadows on the edge of the pastures, and then run out and get that lamb and bring it back into the jungle to eat, basically. Excuse me. So the thicket of the Jordan was the Zor, one of the three physical zones of the Jordan Valley. It was the haunt of the Asiatic lion. So this is real. Lions actually used to be in the Middle East. We don't think about lions. We think of lions in Africa, not Middle East. But they had them there for a while. Let's see. It was a haunt of the Asiatic lion and other wild animals in earlier biblical times. In a similar way, Yahweh, through his agent, the enemy of Edom, would suddenly chase Edom's sheep, i.e., her people, and select the choicest of her rams to devour them. No shepherd in Edom will be able to summon him to explain his actions or stand before him. He would be as irresistible to shepherds and sheep alike as any jungle lion, for he had plans to carry out in regard to Edom, which would bring about their destruction. So this is a story that they would be familiar with in that area. They would know out in these, when you get into those tree lines, out in the thick jungle areas, there were lions. There were king of the jungle. There were bigger, there are bears and things. There's big animals you had to deal with. And so Edom's people is the sheep, Yahweh, and Babylon, with Yahweh's support, basically, is the lion coming down to destroy them. And then they saying, who is like me? Who is going to be worthy to stand before Yahweh to plead these people, especially since they've been so wicked? And why? Verse 20, therefore hear the counsel of the Lord that he hath taken against Edom, for his purposes that he hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them. They were disobedient to God. They're getting destroyed like everybody else at this time, basically. So a lot of changes were happening at this time of Babylonian conquest. Not just Israel, but the whole area. Lots of other nations ceased to exist after this time, or struggled to exist after this time, basically. Now, verse 21 is interesting. The earth is moved at the noise of their fall. At the cry, the noise thereof was heard in the Red Sea. So the story of their destruction will cause people to fear and shake as if an earthquake happens. We're not talking about the earth literally moving. We could think of, like, you could feel the shaking of the ground as the armies of Babylon marched forth and destroyed these people. But this is the reputation of this destruction is going to spread through the land, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh, don't mess with Babylon. Not good." Maybe they heard this down in Egypt, and even to Elephantine in those places too. Now, verse 22 continues on with this. He says, "Behold, he shall come up and fly as the eagle, and spread his wings over Basra, and at that day shall the heart of the mighty men of Edom be as the heart of a woman in her pangs." So we saw this earlier, the same metaphor and idea, basically. This is in the last chapter. So just like an eagle flies over to hunt, okay, he's using apex predators. Lions, eagles, these are apex predators. Babylon is an apex fighting nation. They're going to come in and they're going to take you out, and you are going to panic and freak out, just like how women who go through childbirth. Now, ladies, you can probably expound on this a little more. What is that like to go through childbirth? What is that like? What do you feel inside, the internal emotions and the maybe the worries and concerns about the pain and the suffering, and am I going to live through this? I'm not sure. Especially if you've given birth without epidurals, without more modern medicine, if you've gone all natural, that there's probably some things in there, some metaphor that you can reveal and help us understand of how concerned and afraid were these people probably. What would that be like for them to feel that way as well? And now, verse 23 concerning Damascus. So we're moving north of Israel instead of on the far side of the Dead Sea. We're going to go up north of Israel. Concerning Damascus, Hamath is confounded and Arpad, for they have heard evil tidings. They are faint hearted. There is sorrow on the sea. It cannot be quiet. Damascus is waxed feeble and turneth herself to flee, and fear has seized on her. Anguish and sorrows have taken her as a woman in travail. So this is, again, Damascus is now going, oh crap, this is going to be bad. We're hearing these destructions. Now, Hamath and Arpad are two smaller Aramean city-states in central and northern Syria, which appear often in Assyrian texts of the 8th century and earlier. All three states fell to Tiglath-Pileser, Arpad, and Hamath before 738 BC. And then Damascus in 732 BC. That's when Assyria marched down and took them out, basically. Now, Sargon II had to crush a rebellion in Damascus in 720 BC. It would seem that they lost their independence before the end of the 8th century, but probably regained a measure of independence when Assyria collapsed in 609 BC. They would have become nominal vassals of Egypt. Remember, Battle of Carchemish, Egypt moved up into that area. But they submitted to Nebuchadnezzar after the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. So remember, Egypt was up there. Babylon comes in, takes out Egypt. Egypt flees. Syria has no chance, basically, at this. Damascus was situated as it is today, a short way from Mount Hermon. Hamath was on the river Orontes in central Syria near modern Hama, some 10 miles north of Damascus. It was an important town on the main trade route connecting Asia Minor with the south. Arpad is probably the modern Tel Erfad or Tel Rifa'ad, about 20 miles northwest of Aleppo. The two northern states were dismayed at the news they had heard of the disaster which had befallen Damascus. So they're afraid. Damascus has fallen. Crap, we're next. This isn't going to go well. In fact, verse 25, how is the city of praise not left, the city of my joy? So once an amazing city, Damascus has a rich history of being a heck of a city, a go-to center for commerce and things for the area for a long time. It's as if the people are so surprised Damascus fell. It's gone. It's wiped out. Maybe they thought it could never fall. Maybe that's their surprise. Oh my gosh, Damascus is gone? Babylon destroyed it? Holy crap, we didn't think Damascus could ever fall. Maybe that's part of what they're looking at here, realizing we thought Damascus would survive, and they didn't. Which means if Damascus didn't survive, what chance do our little cities have to survive? Oh, geez, not good. Verse 26, therefore her young men shall fall in her streets, and all the men of war shall be cut off in that day, saith the Lord of hosts. Now here's the thing, if the men are dying in the streets of the city, the battle is in the city. The enemy is there. They're fighting in the streets. They're not fighting on the outside walls. They're fighting in the city, basically. They've been overridden by the enemy. So breach of the walls around them, they're inside the city fighting, basically. Verse 27, and I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall consume the palaces of Ben-Hadad. Now, this is something that's interesting. Kindling a fire in the wall of Damascus. So flamethrowers, not like a portable personal flamethrower like we think of today, but they had these ideas of shooting chemicals out that were on fire to kind of create almost like a napalm type idea to spread fire. And that was part of siege warfare that they would use, is they would burn the city walls. They would cause, the heat to cripple them, to dry them out, to cause problems, to increase the ability to get into those cities, basically. It wasn't uncommon. Now, Ben Hadad, Ben in Hebrew means son. So this means son of Hadad. Now, Hadad is a idol. It's a god, false god. He's the storm, one of the storm deities up this way, basically. He was worshipped by the Arameans, so this is probably Ben Hadad, the son of God, is probably given was a name given to or a title given to the king. Most likely is what that is, basically. So all the palaces of the king, the son of God, will be destroyed, basically by fire. So verse 28, concerning Kedar, okay, and concerning the kingdoms of Hazor. So this is another group of people that Jeremiah is prophesying about, which Nebuchadrezzar, king of Babylon, shall smite, thus saith the Lord. Arise ye, go up to Kedar, and spoil the men of the east. Now these groups are the people who are nomadic. They're out in the desert. These are the Arabic tribes that wander the desert, basically, Kedar and Hazor, these kingdoms. Nomadic Arab groups are likely at any time to make incursions into settled areas to carry off plunder. So this is part of the problem. Babylon's marching through, just annihilating these nations out that we've been learning these last several chapters on. When Babylon moves past them, the wandering nomadic tribes see the opportunity to go into these areas and try to scrape as much value, steal as many coins and potteries and crops and things out of the areas they can to help them survive better out in the desert. So they're opportunists, basically, after a war. So a lion kills an animal, but then the vultures circle and wait for the lion to leave, and then the vultures come in and get the scavengers that wait for the lion to do the dirty work, and they come in to take the rest. That's kind of what happens. These Arabic groups would come in and kind of take whatever's left after the main army has marched through. Now, the Assyrians conducted campaigns against these desert Bedouin Arabs on more than one occasion. On one of the most serious incursions came in the middle of the 7th century when lands in the Transjordan and southern Syria were invaded by Arabs, and Ashurbanipal undertook vigorous punitive raids. With the collapse of Assyria, the Arabs troubled Nebuchadrezzar, and in 599-598 BC, the year prior to his attack on Judah, he conducted a punitive raid against the Arabs. This occasion may well provide the background for the present prophecy. So this prophecy here probably happened before the destruction of Jerusalem, but it was kind of lumped into this chapter and put after in the chronology of this book to put it in with all the rest of the tribes, basically. So this one probably happened, this was probably given probably before destruction of Jerusalem, basically. So rather than wait for them to try to come in and deal with them after the big battle of Judah, they just hit them first and then went after Judah second, basically. So now verse 29, this is more about these groups here. Their tents and their flocks shall they take away. So we're not talking about cities like we've talked about with Edom and others. Their cities, their strongholds will be destroyed. Their tents, these are tent-dwelling nomadic people. They shall take to themselves their curtains, so they would build a big tent and then have curtains to make rooms inside that big tent. And all their vessels and their camels, and they shall cry unto them, fear is on every side. Now there is a place north of Galilee that actually has, as its name Hazor, that has this name, most likely referring to a place in the eastern desert where the Arab tribes would gather. So this could have been a place where they came together. The nomadic tribes would come together some from time to time. This could actually be connected to the Midianites and Amalekites in the book of Judges. If you remember, Midianites are the descendants of Moses' wife. Remember, Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, was of, I remember, Midianites was part of his tribes. And so that's some of these nomadic groups basically out in the desert. So they could have had a gathering place where they would all kind of come together, and that's the area that Babylon wiped them out. They're probably surrounded by that time as well. So verse 30, flee, get you far off, dwell deep, O ye inhabitants of Hazor. saith the Lord, for Nebuchadrezzar king of Babylon hath taken counsel against you, and hath conceived a purpose against you. So this isn't Nebuchadrezzar coming down going, oh yeah, there's these Arabs, just wipe them out. He's planned this. He's put plans in place to get rid of them before he takes out Judah, basically. Verse 31, he probably doesn't want them mingling and meddling with these other battles and things that he's doing. So he's just going to get them out of the way first and then hit the big cities second. So verse 31, arise, get you up unto the wealthy nation that dwelleth without care, saith the Lord, which have neither gates nor bars, which dwell alone. So they're going to have to flee to an established city where they can hide behind a wall to feel safe. Now, if you remember a couple chapters ago, we talked about the Rechabites. The Rechabites is a nomadic group of Jews, basically, that were highly religious, lived their own religion, were out in the nomadic areas. They were then found during the conquest of Babylon, or conquest of Jerusalem, in the city of Jerusalem. They realized outside the city walls, they stand no chance against Babylonians' forces. So they went into the city of Jerusalem to hide behind the wall and hopefully survive the siege and all this out. And it didn't work out, unfortunately. They were blessed to, because they kept the commandments as they knew them, that God blessed them to survive that destruction. And we believe they did. So that's the same thing here in verse 31. These nomadic Arab tribes, if they want to have any chance of surviving, I mean, walled cities, major strongholds aren't standing a chance. If you're living in tents, you have even less chance of survival. So the only way they're going to survive is to flee to some city somewhere that has a wall, has a friendly people to them, and do their best to survive Babylon. It's crazy destruction. In fact, verse 32 continues on, their camels shall be a booty, the multitude of their cattle a spoil. I will scatter into all winds them that are in the uttermost corners, and I will bring their calamity from all sides thereof, saith the Lord. And Hazor shall be a dwelling for dragons, that's jackals, kind of like a wild dog type idea, and a desolation forever. There shall no man abide there, nor any son of man dwell in it. So Hazor is going to be destroyed and not inhabited anymore, basically. Verse 34, so this is another prophecy, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah, the prophet, against Elam in the beginning of the reign of King Zedekiah, king of Judah, saying, so just that we have some time context with this one. So this revelation, while all these are lumped together into one chapter, they're separate revelations, okay? The scribe, whoever put the book of Jeremiah together, put all these together in one chapter. The bunch of small revelations about all these people, we're going to put in this chapter, but we have to realize this one, it's in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah. So this is 597 BC. This is 11 years, about 10, 11 years before Jerusalem is destroyed. So this is again another prophecy that was given before the destruction of Jerusalem. So the Arabs were warned before Jerusalem was destroyed. Edom was a lot of these were revealed before Jerusalem was destroyed. So Jeremiah wasn't just prophesying about Jerusalem, but prophesying about some of these other areas around Jerusalem. So even though here in the book of Jeremiah, they come, if we think of the book of Jeremiah as its own chronology, these are coming after the destruction of Jerusalem. But we have to understand that these are a bunch of separate, smaller revelations that were put into one chapter to fit the book. But they actually truly happened before the destruction of Jerusalem, in the real time, basically. So now Elam, let's talk about these people real quick before we get into the prophecy. Elam is east of Babylon. So not even a close neighbor to Jerusalem. These people are way east of Babylon. Babylon was like the border of Iraq and Iran, and now this is east of them. So this is getting over to where like the Zoroastrians and others were. In ancient times, it was a significant nation in the politics of Lower Mesopotamia. After many years of conflict in Assyria, Elam was finally conquered by Ashurbanipal about 640 BC, when Ashurbanipal destroyed the capital Susa. In 612 BC, Cyaxares, the Median ruler, helped Nabopolassar of Babylon destroy Nineveh, the Syrian capital, and presumably this meant freedom for Elam once again. So Elam was conquered when Babylon was conquered by Assyria. Elam was conquered too, but Elam helped with the Medes, basically, as well as with Babylon, to fight against Assyria and win. They thought because they helped Babylon win, they were going to be neighbors and friends of Babylon. Well, that didn't happen. Babylon ended up conquering them and taking them over as well. And then we know the Persians came back and took over Babylon later on. That's about 70 years after the destruction of Jerusalem. So let's see here. It may become independent, but a little earlier, perhaps around 625 BC. A broken text in the Babylonian Chronicle may indicate a clash between Nebuchadnezzar and Elam in 596 BC to prevent the Elamite advance into Babylonia. If the interpretation of the fragmentary text is correct, Jeremiah's date of 597, the ascension of Zedekiah, would predate this event. Jeremiah's prophecy added weight to earlier prophecies about a long exile for the captive Judeans. The present oracle cut short any hope of an early return, for it indicated that Elam would be overwhelmed herself in the will of Yahweh. So again, this is 597 BC when this is happening. Okay, so now let's read about the prophecy to the people of Elam. Verse 35, thus saith the Lord of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of their might. So that can tell us that Elam was probably well known for their archers. They probably specialized possibly in that type of warfare, of being able to attack at a distance with bows. Verse 36, and upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four quarters of heaven, and will scatter them towards all those winds, and there shall be no nation whither the outcasts of Elam shall not come. So they're going to be scattered across the entire known world, basically. They were basically absorbed into the Persian Empire in 593 BC, basically, or 539, excuse me, I switched those, 539 BC, when Persia came out and became the big world power at that point. So they probably got folded into the Persian army as good archers. That's kind of a good division of your army to have. If you ever watch Lord of the Rings, those elven archers make a big difference in fighting. They help. So you want good archers, and so they probably got brought into the Persian army that way. Okay, verse 37, for I will cause Elam to be dismayed before their enemies and before them that seek their life. And I will bring evil upon them, even my fierce anger, saith the Lord. And I will send the sword after them till I have consumed them. So it's going to be a long fight. Lots of destruction that's going to happen, basically. Verse 38, and I will set my throne in Elam, and will destroy from thence the king and the princes, saith the Lord. So now it was common for a conquering king to put his throne in the palace of the nation he just conquered, basically. So this is, in a way, saying God is going to take over this area. He is the one that's in charge. But, verse 39, but it shall come to pass in the latter days that I will bring again the captivity of Elam, saith the Lord. So another day of restoration will happen for these people. So they weren't totally destroyed, but we'll have, in the latter days, a regathering. So this is, we're talking like Iran, present day Iran, probably that area. There'll be a gathering that'll happen there of these types of people, basically. Who these people are today, I have no idea. I don't know, from a genetic standpoint or a genealogical standpoint, I don't know who these people would be. But God does know, and that gathering will happen in His time. Could this be something worth looking at? Are people gathering to the nation of Iran or that, that area over there? Maybe there's something to that's not obvious to us because we're not thinking about that from a gathering standpoint. But maybe it's already happened. Maybe it hasn't happened. We don't know. But this is the prophecy from Jeremiah, basically. So I hope you've enjoyed this chapter. A lot of little things to discuss and talk about, but I hope you kind of see not just these revelations and who these people were historically, but also realize how this chapter was formed. This chapter came together at a later date after Jeremiah's time, is when this was brought together. Baruch probably had a hand in some of this, but there's also a good chance later scribes were used in putting this together. So it's not all chronological, but it's organized in a way that they thought would make sense, basically. So that's just kind of interesting insight into how ancient books are put together, basically. So let's jump over to the next chapter as we continue forward. This is another interesting one about the prophecy of Babylon that we're going to get into next.